I think South Africa is doing better than some places, and it's not meeting the expectations, mostly of a lot of South Africans whose expectations have been raised. Look, South Africa has been in some respects, in the longer term view, a spectacular success. If you would have gone back, and I'm embarrassed to say I haven't been here for 20 years, but it gives you some benefits to not have been here for 20 years. I came a lot earlier in my career, and not so much, in the last couple of decades. I've been doing this for a long time. But it does give you some perspective. If you would have said 20 years ago and projected out where South Africa is today, the band of possible outcomes for the South African economy, given all the objectives of what was sought to be accomplished in what was an economic revolution, but undoubtedly, and far more importantly, a big social revolution, this would have exceeded the extreme upside. Yet, over this period of time, expectations have gone on. There's been upside and disappointments in some respects. And I would say that there are aspects of the current situation in South Africa that are the same problems that people have all over. So if you went to the United States now, the topic would be, where are the jobs? Where's the distribution of the wealth that in fact has been created in the most recent period of time? The failure of the society, in some cases the leadership, to drive a commitment to investing in infrastructure, because infrastructure, the expense and the cost and burden of that kind of investment takes place immediately and the benefits are in the future. But that would be the conversation in the US, crumbling infrastructure, and it's certainly the conversation here. Those are the problems that everybody has. They're amplified by certain distinctive aspects of South Africa, namely, the history which we're all aware of, and the vast inequalities that have to be changed, and frankly, starting from a much lower base, so that when the economy adjusts back downwards, it goes to a lower low than is evident in other places because of where the starting point was. Then there are unique advantages of this place. The disadvantage of coming from a place where GDP, and now I'm talking about not only South Africa, but the neighborhood, is so low that it gives you the opportunity for a higher growth rate. The fact that not everybody has participated in the economy gives you advantage of, and these people call this a democratic advantage, which in some cases a burden, in some cases a huge advantage, of that will be a driver of growth as people are admitted into the productive economy and removed from being a kind of a beneficiary of other people's production. Mm-hmm. And so it's a mixed thing, and everybody, in this world today, coming out of a recession and at various stages of it, everybody's had, go everywhere, and everybody's very much reminded daily about what their specific problems are. Again, South Africa has some of the generic problems that everybody has, and some special ones, but with those problems also comes an opportunity set, higher growth opportunities, both from within South Africa and from the broader continent.
If we leverage off them correctly, and if we remedy some of the challenges that we face, chief amongst them right now, Eskom, state utility here in South Africa, with powers constraints that are impeding growth because of the kind of impact it's having on productivity, the cost of doing business as well. Do you have any advice to government on the management or funding of a state utility like Eskom? Because it's not just Eskom. SOEs in South Africa are failing, and one's got to ask the question, why China, for example, is getting things right. What lessons do we have to extract?
Well, China's getting things right, but and China has accumulated a lot of wealth, and everyone's focused on it, but divided by the number of people, and you see that China has a long way to go. And if you go to Beijing and you go to Shanghai and you go to that corridor and other big cities, you see a lot of growth, but you could see that they also have tremendous challenges, also of the same kind.
So just looking at advice and what lessons we can extract,
sure.
Because you talk about...
I'll give advice, but let me give advice with the same qualification that pops into my mind when I get advice, which is that it's very easy to give advice because you give advice and then you walk away. And of course, I don't bear the burden of the trade-offs and the execution risk that political leaders have to take. And when people give me advice, I'd say, yes, But let me tell you, that works for the shareholders, doesn't work for the employees. It works for the employees, it doesn't work for the clients. And I have to balance these things, and you'll be gone in 2 days, and I'll still be here. So I'll give you that advice, but with all due, and it's not just humility, it's just the awareness of being on the other side of this advice flow when I get it. It just strikes me that the predicate has to be that the infrastructure has to be clear. How are you going to get people to go in and launch manufacturing and build their business if the power is going to go off predictably or worse, unpredictably, and for periods of time? Doesn't that have to be the predicate? So you talk about infrastructure, and almost definitionally, infrastructure supports everybody. You are born in the United States, and without lifting a finger, without spending a penny, you're not born into a state of nature. You're born into a system that has roads and airports and power grid that works. And this goes to the question of, everybody's self-sufficient and does it all. Yes, I did it all, but I did it all because somebody built a road system before I even got there, before I even drew my first breath. Here, it's a lot tougher. You have to get that initial predicate and the framework done so that then everybody could do it by themselves, which they're kind of doing by themselves, but kind of not, because the overall society is also making the preconditions in terms of law and everything, but infrastructure, real investment has been made for us before we got here. Unfortunately, this is an emerging country and an emerging economy. In the U.S., I'm worried at times that some of the infrastructure is crumbling. It's worse if you don't have any to begin with or don't have enough. So the power grid has to be sorted out, and other elements of infrastructure have to be sorted out. You have to get good management in the biggest industries, in the biggest companies. There's a lot of, and for good reason, there's a lot of state ownership of very, very important companies that in other countries would be public companies, that is, owned by shareholders and subject to market pressures and market disciplines and market transparency. There's good reasons why countries at different stages of development would do that differently. But if there's no market discipline and no market transparency, that may not be entirely good either. And so maybe we have to work our way to more of a hybrid system where there's, like they've done in China, where those big companies that are so important to the development of China are still controlled by the central government and majority owned, in most cases 80% owned, but there's a 20% in some cases float, so that there is there's subjectivity. They're listed on exchanges, subject to those rules, subject to that transparency, subject to the discipline of shareholders who are not just giving abstract advice, but very self-interested advice, because they're owners of the company also, but they don't control it. And so the government doesn't have to worry that the strategy would be contra to the overall interest of the governing party. So that's an example. Education also is a form of infrastructure because it's a predicate. You go to a place and you want to. We make our decisions in some cases where to relocate. Let's say the kind of operational parts of our business, based on where we can hire people. We're beneficiaries of other people's investment. We're not educating people from the time they're 2 years old in preschool, taking them through university, and then hiring them. We find them already educated. That's what South Africa is competing with. Other countries who are providing education so that when you go in there, you're getting a subsidy of a kind. Nobody's writing us a check or General Electric a check, but the subsidy is coming from we're finding an educated workforce that we only had to supplement with the specific training necessary to do your job at our companies.